The loudest scars of World War II weren't always left on battlefields. Some came home quietly, wrapped in uniforms, riding trains, back to towns that didn't know how to look at them anymore. Randy Adams is one of those names that doesn't echo like a general or a conqueror, but his story cuts deeper than most, because Randy Adams represents the war after the shooting stopped, the damage that followed soldiers home, and the kind of courage that never shows up in victory parades. This is not a story about winning battles. This is a story about surviving life after war. Randy Adams served in the US Army during World War II at a time when millions of young men were pulled from ordinary lives and thrown into a global furnace. He wasn't a famous officer or a decorated battlefield legend. He was a regular soldier, trained hard, disciplined harder, and shaped by a military machine that needed speed, obedience, and sacrifice. Like many soldiers, his war didn't end the day the enemy surrendered. In fact, for Randy Adams, the most life-altering moment came away from enemy fire. During a training accident involving explosives, he lost both of his hands. Not in combat, not under heroic circumstances. Just one sudden moment that changed everything. And that detail matters, because it shattered a comforting myth. War doesn't only wound heroes in battle. Losing both hands in World War II was not just a physical injury. It was a social sentence. Medical science could keep him alive, but society had no clear place for a man who could no longer work the way he once did, shake hands the same way, or blend back into civilian life unnoticed. Randy Adams was discharged from the US Army with hooks replacing hands and a future filled with uncertainty. Jobs were scarce even for able-bodied veterans. For someone visibly disabled, the odds were brutal. What followed was not immediate triumph. It was frustration, awkward stares, people talking slower around him, employers quietly deciding he was a risk, strangers unsure whether to help or look away. Randy Adams did something radical for his time. He refused to disappear. He learned to eat, dress, smoke, write, and live independently using prosthetic hooks. Not because it was inspirational, but because survival demanded it. He trained himself relentlessly, turning frustration into muscle memory and determination into daily routine. This wasn't cinematic heroism. It was stubborn grit, the kind of strength that grows in kitchens, workshops, and crowded streets where no one claps. His story challenged a powerful idea, that disability meant helplessness. Randy Adams proved that adaptation could be just as powerful as brute force. Randy Adams became widely known through his portrayal in the acclaimed post-war film The Best Years of Our Lives. The character bearing his name was played by Harold Russell, who himself was a US Army veteran who had lost both hands in a training accident during World War II. This wasn't Hollywood pretending, it was reality stepping onto the screen. Audiences weren't watching an actor simulate loss. They were watching lived experience. Every movement, every pause, every quiet moment of frustration and dignity. The film didn't glorify war. It showed the emotional wreckage left behind. Veterans struggling to reconnect, families unsure how to help, a nation eager to move on while its soldiers were still catching up. The performance struck a nerve because it was honest. And honesty was rare in a time when victory narratives dominated headlines. Randy Adams' legacy is not about prosthetics or film awards. It's about preparedness for the reality of war's aftermath. World War II created millions of veterans who carried invisible wounds, psychological trauma, physical loss, identity fractures. Randy Adams embodied that truth in a way statistics never could. His story teaches us that resilience is learned, not granted, that recovery is messy and slow, and that real strength often looks unimpressive from the outside. For modern viewers, especially those fascinated by survival and preparedness, this matters. Because true preparedness isn't just about gear or shelters. It's about adaptability, mental endurance, and the ability to rebuild purpose when life no longer follows the plan. Randy Adams survived without hands in a world that offered little patience. That is preparedness in its rawest form. World War II ended on paper in 1945. For Randy Adams, the war continued every morning he woke up and faced a society unsure of how to include him. And yet he lived, he worked, he inspired, not through speeches or slogans, but through example. His story forces us to rethink what victory really means. Not flags raised or enemies defeated, but lives rebuilt, dignity reclaimed, and scars worn without shame. At the scars of a global storm fronts, we don't just cover wars, we explore their echoes. Randy Adams is one of those echoes that refuses to fade. His life reminds us that history isn't clean, it's human, and often uncomfortable. But it's in these uncomfortable truths that the real lessons live. If stories like this matter to you, if you want history that doesn't flinch or sugarcoat, make sure you subscribe. Share this video with someone who thinks World War II was only about battles and generals. And keep coming back as we uncover the scars the world still carries. Because the storm may pass, but the front lines never really disappear.